Will I be subject to mandatory detention by ICE? This is what are, I guess the question here is really, what are the types of cases that warrant mandatory detention and where detention is mandatory from authorities. And so the first situation is when you have been convicted of what's called an aggravated felony. An aggravated felony, there's a long list, but typically these are like egregious felonies. They're drug offenses, they're firearm related offenses, and things of that nature. Okay. The second type of violation that typically triggers mandatory detention is if you have re-entered the United States after being deported or removed once. And so if you re-enter, so getting deported or removed the first time, that's still a civil violation. It's a civil issue. But if you attempt to re-enter and you do successfully try to re-enter and you get apprehended or caught, then you face, it's a federal crime to do that. And so that crime I think you have some kind of mandatory detention between 6 months and 2 years. And so that triggers a mandatory detention. Another category of mandatory detention are what's called crimes involving moral turpitude, or CIMTs. And so ag felonies or aggravated crimes are those are by statute. So basically there's a list that typically tells you what are the aggravated felonies, the aggravated types of crimes that for which there's mandatory detention that's a requisite. But for CIMTs, those are not by statute. Those are on a case-by-case basis. So then, attorneys look to different case laws and how do different immigration judges cover them, or different federal judges cover them, and then they try to read into that, whether they will cause a likely mandatory detention or not. For example, there are some general hard and fast rules like if you're convicted of or if you're arrested, not even convicted sometimes. So if there's an arrest for CIMT no, I take that back. It's not really arrest, it's a conviction. But if you're convicted of a CIMT, which has the sentence of a year or longer, which has a sentence of longer to a year, you might be subject to mandatory detention. Further, if you've been convicted of 2 CIMTs, then independently of what the sentence was, that triggers mandatory detention. You see, so it gets a little tricky here, and CIMTs basically refer to theft or fraud, or cases where there's morality at stake, or the immorality at stake. There's some kind of like fraudulent, lying, misrepresentation type, theft related activity. And so those are some of the ways and convictions that trigger mandatory detention, and the list that I gave you, it's not exhaustive. You have there might be other conditions when detention is triggered.